Hey everyone, Michael Joseph here, the host of Libertis Horizon Membercast. For the past 5 years, we've been hosting private membercasts, and they've never been released on any public platform, social medias, YouTubes, etc. And last night we had such an impactful and revelatory event on the topic of anti-geoengineering and the propagandized aspect of how that functions and what's creating our viewpoints on geoengineering and chemtrails, etc. And again, it was such an impactful event that we thought it prudent to bring it forward. And we had guests Reinette Senum, Jim Lee, and David Avocado Wolfe. And it was a very compelling and evidentiary discussion that we wanted to bring it forward so as many people could have access to this information with the kind of awareness that was brought forward. We hope you find this episode impactful, and please share. Welcome to the Libertis Horizon. Welcome to the Libertis Horizon. Here we are yet again. Super pumped about tonight. I'm host Michael Joseph, co-host Shiloh Boss and Daniel Mentz. And behind the scenes, our tech support, or our support, is Katisha. Thank you all for being here. Tonight, we have really a rather unprecedented evening. I don't think we've ever had 3 guests before, unless we had a summit or something. Tonight we have 3 guests, so we're really stretching things, which is awesome. Reinette Senum, Jim Lee, and David Avocado Wolfe. Love you guys. Thank you for being here.
Hearty souls. Always a pleasure to stretch into consciousness and ground things in reality together with you guys.
So as some of you are already doing, these are always live. We've been doing them live from the very beginning. And we always love to know where some of you folks are coming from. So just throw some stuff in the chat. Some of you already have done that. Lots of familiar faces. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Deeply appreciate it. So what we do here, what we've been doing for years, this is really just about coming together and having honest conversations about sometimes not the most convenient topics. And as the world has been turning, especially since COVID, the corporate state or the global players have been making life rather interesting for most people. And I say that in the best way, that they've been rearing their head in a way and people are becoming more aware of it. So we decided to launch the Libertis Horizon, which at one point was the PMA Weekly for many years, where we had a place to come together so we could be in community and speak our truth, and we could figure out solutions away from the restraints of the encumbrances of that corporate state of the globalists. So that's really been our big MO. And that has birthed into the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship. And so, I'm really super excited about this conversation, kind of unpacking some of the deeper truths, or for some reason, I want to call them newer truths. And I say that because in the truth community, there's been a lot of misconceptions, and we're going to unpack some of those this evening. So I'm extraordinarily pumped about tonight's conversation and our guests.
I love that too, because we were just riffing around how important it is to keep a pliable mind, right? As we're always learning and growing, being willing to confront where might we be a little lodged in our thinking. And so we've got a good dialogue tonight where we're going to be throwing out some of just the running assumptions and exposing them and taking a new angle. So hopefully all of us are going to learn something. And so keep a pliable brain, everyone.
Yeah, indeed. So before we get started, I want to do a couple of things. As you guys, if you've been tracking us for a while, you kind of know our flow at this point. So we've got some announcements in regards to the fellowship, the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship. Actually, I'm going to start with, we've officially, on Libertis Horizon, we've officially created the archives for the Libertis Horizon. So for the active members in the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship, you now have access to all the archives for the Libertis Horizon member casts. Okay. So if you're not familiar with it, then you can click this link right here and become an active member. And there's a lot of benefits for becoming an active member, far beyond the Libertis Horizon recordings. You have all the past PMA weeklies. You have access to all the special events that we've done, private recordings. And then if you've been a member of any one of the pathways, then it gives you direct access back into some of those pathways if they've expired, etc. Worthy of checking out. You guys want to say anything else about that, Shiloh, Daniel? Anything?
That's good. I mean, we're starting to call it a vault of information.
Yeah.
And it's also really a great way for folks to really learn more and more about the tools and the lifestyle of self-governance. Not everyone's ready to dive in and roll up their sleeves and dive into a pathway that's going to change their life. They want to just get oriented a little bit. Active fellowship's a great way to do that.
Yeah, and so within that, we've got two particular pathways that people have been kind of chomping at the bit to get into. And we have the trifecta curriculum that is officially being launched here very, very soon, and the equity passage, which people have been so pumped about and waiting for the next opening that's happening as well, all around the corner in the next couple of weeks. So just track your emails. And for some of you that aren't familiar with Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship, you can become a general member. There's the link down there, and you can become a general member. And by virtue of that, you can go in and obviously track a lot of the pathways and the educational information that we have in there on self-governance. And you can watch a new edumentary that was just produced and we released just a couple of weeks ago called Breaking the Spell. So it's an
Breaking the Spell.
Hour and 4 minutes long. It's very deep. It's definitely designed to be referenced as an educational piece of material. And it talks about the corporate state. It gets into commerce and contracts. It really breaks down the ins and outs of how the system functions and how the system has done such a great job at getting us to consent into their particular jurisdictional world, right? So it breaks down what jurisdiction is. It's very, very good contextual to start there. And then you can go into some of those pathways that we were just talking about. So wanted to share that. Anything else you guys want to say on that before I move on?
Feels good. We're so excited to dive in.
Right, I am too. All right, so up next, we have Kevin Jenkins. Kevin's kind of been quiet for a couple of years. He's been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I know you know what Kevin's up to. So Kevin's coming on. It's the first time he's done a member cast or a podcast in quite a while. When COVID hit, he was hard and heavy on the road. I don't think he went home for 4 years. That guy was so hard in charge, really trying to bring forth some truth to help change some hearts. So I really love Kevin and excited to have him back on. And we're going to talk really about the Freedom Health community and what happened to the Freedom Health community. It's kind of gone wonky. So he's going to unpack that, and we're going to talk about his ideas and theories of using bureaucracy as a way to help make change within the freedom communities, believe it or not. It's going to be kind of interesting. So tune in. And then we have our beloved Marsha Ann, who's going to join us after that. And who knows where that's going to go? It's always golden.
Well, she's doing some really amazing things, in terms of taking the sovereign structures and merging them into indigenous land and indigenous space land groups. So check that out, folks, in terms of if you want to look at some of the larger strategy of sovereign people and sovereign structures.
Well, I say we should get started. Shiloh, you want to
Let's do a ministerial moment, my friends. We do like to just humbly, pay an homage to the biblical structures, as the history shows that it is Mosaic law that really gives the strength and the teeth and the spirit that really is, dare I say, the magic or the might behind lawful remedies. It's certainly not Babylonian law. Nope, none of that's those statutes and codes. It is the stuff that came from the Most High Yahweh. And so with that, I'm going to speak from Jeremiah 9:23. I am really, really loving the prophets because we are in prophetic times. It's kind of mind blowing. But check this out. We also love to look at wisdom. This is what the Lord says. So, Prophet Jeremiah, in profound interface with the Lord Almighty, he writes in Jeremiah 9, this is what the Lord says. Let not the wise boast of their wisdom, or the strong boast of their strength, or the rich boast of their riches. But let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me, the understanding to press into relationship with the God of the universe, that I am the Lord who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these I delight, declares the Lord. So, my friends, I just invite us actually to take courage and find a posture that just presses in to that source that delights in kindness, delights in justice, delights in righteousness. Just breathe that in and let that abide and reign in your awareness right now. For in these we delight. Welcome, friends.
Thank you, Shiloh. Thanks for bringing that in.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of courageous hearts, we have 3 beautiful courageous hearts as our guests today. Reinette Senum, Lee David Avocado Wolfe. Welcome, beautiful friends. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So tonight, we're going to dive in, for some of you that are just kind of popping in, we're going to dive into some, what I like to call, deeper truths of geoengineering, unpack some of the misconceptions and confusions, perhaps purposefully, about what's been going on in geoengineering and the truther community, then even at large, and perhaps maybe tap into the Dan Whittington story of what's really going on with that cat. We'll see what happens. So it's been an interesting evolution how this particular member cast has evolved. It started out with Reinette Senum and I deciding to have a conversation about this because we had lunch a couple of months back, and she was dropping some knowledge. I'm like, yeah, we need to bring this forward a little bit more. And then from there, of course, it was a natural shoe-in for Jim Lee, since you guys are working together. I'm like, yeah, let's just bring Jim on as well, please. And then Avocado and I were talking a couple of weeks ago about geoengineering in this very story, and he was bringing forth some stuff. And like, okay, great, this is going to be perfect for us to bring forth the misconceptions and unpack them all at the same time. So we thought this would be a great deal of fun to do it this way.
Yeah.
So thanks for being the player and the players for this. I really appreciate it.
Reinette, I mean, my recollection with you is, you have such a history of local governance. I met you many years ago when you were the mayor, and tell us just a little bit, just super brief, like how long have you been running in the strategy of geoengineering?
I became aware of geoengineering around 2005, 2007, so near the 20-year mark. And I started noticing these streaks in the sky, raised in this area, half hour from where I am right now. Sailed as a child. Skies were never like this. And so as a city council member and as a mayor of Nevada City, California, I was calling out geoengineering, emceed some protests at the Sacramento Capitol, and I took a ton of heat.
Mm-hmm.
COVID struck, dropped everything, was COVID centric. A couple of years ago, actually, when Avocado was passing through Nevada City and visiting Michael, tried to, hook up with him and say hello. And we were just starting our snowpocalypse. And it was actually that snowpocalypse that made me go, okay, damn it, I'm going back to geoengineering again. We have an issue here. There's nothing natural about this. So I started Gen 7, a nonprofit under that is Save Our Skies. And ultimately, my objective was, I'm taking this to court. I know it's taken so long. I don't know why anyone else is not taking this to court, but I'm taking this to court. And it was during that process that I brought in a constitutional team of legal attorneys, from Dallas, Texas, Houston. And I started taking that narrative that I was very, very familiar with for the last nearly 20 years and began to work on it to have standing and put the evidence together to take it to court. And it completely fell apart. And I had a complete existential meltdown crisis of like, now what do I do?
The case fell apart, or your discoveries, like what you thought was the story?
Discoveries and the evidence and backing it up to make sure it had standing and just bringing it all together fell apart. And that's when I had to stand back and go, oh my God, now what do I do? This is not what I thought. And I thought, well, what are you here for? To back up the narrative you believed in, to prove that you're right with the narrative you believe in, or are you here to get to the truth and reclaim our healthy, clear skies again? And so I decided, and by that time I was already, connected with Jim, started doing more deep dive on what he was talking about, which is quite radically different than what I was led to believe. And not that these clandestine secretive programs aren't going on, but there's another layer to it that I wasn't really aware of. And looking into that, that's when my world changed. And today we're now putting together a petition for rulemaking to the EPA, Cal EPA, FAA, with all this information Jim will get into a little later.
Right. So you decided to take this on in a different fashion, and in that and so maybe we can unpack that a little bit later, because I think people should know what you're doing, because you need some support in that realm.
Yes.
So I'd love to, Avo, to unpack some of, I'm just going to call them the perceptions of the geoengineering.
Yeah, common perceptions. Like, what's the common narrative that most of us are standing in, right?
It appears that most of us became aware of this somewhere in the 1990s or early 2000s. I became aware of it probably in the 1990s, and we just assumed it was just an out-of-control military project. I think most people assume this is the U.S. military or some kind of a DARPA thing. So I'm just going to give you my assumptions that are out there. I think a lot of people assume it is geoengineering and take it at face value. So they're steering hurricanes, causing droughts, creating storms, all that kind of stuff. Dane Wigington's type of stuff. Dane Wigington, we always would say that dude's wigging out. That was always our joke. We always had a lot of fun with what we would watch a Dane Wigington video and just wig out for an hour. You'd just be like, the GeoN, his whole spiel. It's comedy. Anyway, so that's part of the assumptions. And then what are we getting sprayed with? Numerous metals, the barium, strontium, aluminum, that stuff, biological materials, nanotechnology. That all seems to be in the zeitgeist of what we're being sprayed with. Mike Adams has done a number of laboratory tests on chemtrail debris that I'm privy to that kind of supports that belief, and others have as well. And so I'm generally in that camp. There's the blocking out the sun thing. There's definitely something going on with that, because when we have a few days of clear weather, all of a sudden the lines are up there at 4 or 5 in the morning, and next thing you know, by the afternoon, it's dimmed out the what would have been a clear day. So that appears to have some weight. The whole Bill Gates thing, blocking out the sun. It seems that they're spraying the ecliptic. That also seems to have some weight. This may have something to do with blocking energies coming from the heavens, including the luminaries, the stars, the sun, and the moon, etc. That may be part of this. This whole idea of spraying to block the sun has something to do maybe with the wake up that humanity is going through, which seems to be energies coming from the sun. They're trying to block it. So that's part of the narrative that's in there. Are there actual chemtrail pilots, or are they all drones? Are they commercial aircraft? I've been in all those camps. I mean, I've had guys, good friends of mine, like Crow 777, who filmed chemtrail planes for years, trying to zoom in on the actual logo on the plane, and it was fake. It was like a fake United Emirates, for example. So they're trying to. So that's out there too. It's like, what are these planes actually? Are they really up there? Is like, what's really going on?
Well, just to riff on that a little bit too, David, like, I don't know about you guys. I mean, I'm curious, just even our attendees. I mean, I've seen footage, right, where it shows like you're in the plane and there's all these big tanks, right, that are spraying stuff that are loaded up, even people that this one woman in like Santa Cruz or something, she went to the private airport and was like, stop doing this. You guys I'm watching you just coat our skies regularly. Stop doing it. And the guy's like, and she's, who do you work for? He's like, I'm not telling you, all that kind of. So there's Like there's footage of this stuff
But
out there.
that was actually Catherine Sari, and she confronted a Weather Modification Incorporated cloud seeding pilot, which we gave her the tailfin number for in our Telegram chat. Not a chemtrail plane. It was a cloud seeding weather modification plane.
She was part of my Save Our Skies team member, essentially, and we asked her to correct the story because it was so misleading, and she wouldn't. It's a cloud seeder.
Really?
So these are some distinctions, it sounds like. There's chemtrails, there's cloud seeding, right? And then another thing, I've seen this guy who he works somewhere in Chicago, and he's up on the rooftop, and there's like these huge engines, and he says they're cloud seeding. Where we're like, they're just shooting all this stuff up in the air, and he's like, we control the weather.
Yeah, there's numerous ground-based weather modification, like they're blowing clouds up into the sky videos that we've seen over the years. I think, is that what you're saying, Shiloh? That's what you're referencing, right?
Yep. And from the ground, they're on roofs.
Yeah, that's part of it too. And whole power plants are blasting this stuff up. Then there's the whole idea of where's the chemtrail debris coming from? And so a lot of people are saying it's like coal tar debris. It's like what's being pushed out of coal plants. They're blasting it out on top of us. Other people have said, and I've looked at this for many years, even decades, that the U.S. military is the #1 polluter on Earth. I'd love anybody to refute that. I've never been able to refute that. And they're blowing out debris up there that they can't get rid of down here because there's too much red tape. And so someone's taking a paycheck and blow it out on top, by geoengineering, chemtrailing, contrails, whatever you want to call it. So that's part of it that comes in. And so is it a drone thing? Is it cloud seeding? Is it chemtrailing? Is it contrails? What's going on? Then we've got some observations personally that I want to kind of throw in here that I've observed for 30, 40 years. One of them is the jet fuel hoax. I was one of the people that uncoded the jet fuel hoax. There's no way that the aircraft that we're flying on has as much fuel as they claim on it. No, not a possibility. I would get out of the aircraft, sit there, and walk down the jetway, and just film them refuel the plane. And they'd come over and be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm filming them refuel the plane." And they go, "Okay." Then I'd sit there and I just film them refuel the plane. It never, ever, ever took more than 15 minutes. Usually 12 minutes, 9 minutes, or less to fill a jet aircraft. I filmed close. I would zoom in on their little number counter, trying to figure out what's going on, like what units they're using. There's no way any of that makes any sense, by the way. There's no way. Here's another thing on the jet fuel hoax. There's no way there's that much fuel in those aircraft. And on top of that, I was on a 747 coming out of Amsterdam. 75 minutes into the flight, we were over Western Ireland. The plane had a fire in the cargo. They dumped but from the time that the guy made the announcement till we were on the ground, including dumping the fuel, was 22 minutes. They dumped all the fuel, full 747 aircraft, overpopulated area. There's no way that had 267 Camaros weight worth of fuel. That's such a pile of crap. I just want to throw that into the mix. They've been spraying. I have observed chemtrail routes as far north as Iceland, and even there's a route that they do that goes across the north of Iceland. So that gives me the idea that it's NATO, and that NATO is involved in this, and that the Icelanders have told me that before too. So wanted to throw that in there. Are commercial jets spraying this stuff, or are they just what's spraying the plane spraying are disguised as commercial jets? Are actual commercial jets involved? More recently, I've come to the conclusion that maybe they are. Maybe they are. We'll find out. I'd love to hear what Jim Lee has to say about that. So those chemtrails are coming out higher than commercial jet aircraft. In my experience flying commercially, the chemtrails appear to be above us by 8,000 feet and descending down from there. That's my feeling about that. And one more thing I want to put in here that I've observed many times with my friend Crow 777, who's filmed chemtrail debris for over 20 years. And one is that UFOs and chemtrails together has been filmed many times. He's filmed it. I just watched a video he sent that there was 4 UFOs in the video. It's unmistakable. Side profile. There's one video he has of a UFO or orb entering a chemtrail and firing lasers at it. No kidding, no exaggeration, and it's not a hoax. So I just want to kind of throw that in there because that, just no matter how much you think you know what this thing is, I don't know. There's just evidence keeps coming in that goes, I don't know what the hell what's going on. So Those are my observations, and those are my assumptions.
Yeah, and there's one more level, if I may just quickly add something to that, David. There's also what we've seen and what we've observed, and I have personally observed this too, is that some of these planes seem to be holograms, because all of a sudden they blip in and out of the sky. I've watched it myself, right? You see there's the lines break up, and all of a sudden the plane is gone. So is that some kind of interdimensional tech? Is it a hologram? Is it a UFO? That's another layer on top of all this.
Or it could be a tiny drone that's spraying, that's producing a hologram around itself as an aircraft, something like that.
Wow.
And you were also talking to me, David, a couple of weeks ago about the inversion motors or the inversion engines.
Okay, so the way that I got into the jet fuel hoax, many of you have come to the realization of the jet fuel hoax. The way I got into it is because of Victor Schauberger's whole thing on the implosion motor. The implosion motor, when you're near it, actually has a friendly experience, whereas an explosion motor, like a car engine, it's kind of an unfriendly experience to be close to it. There's a lot of heat and disturbed energy. And I had one time I sat in the back of a jet aircraft with the twin jets in the back, like the old TWA style. Mm-hmm. And I was right next to that jet engine. It was right next to me. And I was like, there's any feelings of like I'm in a car, automobile, or this thing is jet. It's right next to me.
Oh, and you didn't have any of the disturbing energy.
Yeah, of a disturbing energy. That's what flipped me onto it. I was like, this is an implosion motor. We're getting lied to. This is an implosion motor. There's no way it's an explosion phenomenon going on here. Again, when you're dealing with an explosionary phenomenon like a car engine, what you're doing is you're burning up things that are already created to create energy that's running the thing, and you're going to have friction and heat, loss of energy, inefficiencies, etc. Implosion motors are kind of the opposite side, where you have high amounts of efficiency, over unity effects. It's very friendly to be next to it. It's very quiet, and it's also uses almost no fuel, or the only time you actually use the fuel for an implosion motor is to start it. Right. Then it runs itself. The main thing is you have to break it so it doesn't implode on itself. So all implosion motors will have explosionary phenomenon around them, like shapes, in order to break them, and all all explosionary motors, like a car automobile engine, will have implosionary phenomenon around them, like certain shapes will be structured in a certain way so that they don't explode, right? So the implosion controls the explosion, and the explosion controls the implosion. And so that's how I got wind of it initially about 20-something years ago, that there's no way this engine is burning fuel.
Right. Anyway, what David's done is he's just laid out like a variety of vectors. Let's just call them vectors, right?
Thank you, by the way.
And then, thank you, David. And then maybe Reinette, if you want to just kind of maybe encapsulate some of what the frame that you thought you had before it got debunked, and then maybe we can turn it over to Jim.
Well, there's quite a few different things. A big jaw dropper for me was the realization that the vast majority of the streaks in the sky that I've been yelling at for years, you see them or you don't see them according to the atmospheric conditions. And I only know this because a year and a half ago, Jeff Ray, meteorologist, came along, formerly from the Navy, on an aircraft carrier. His job was to look at radiosonde data, which essentially tells you where jets can fly from the aircraft carrier and come back without a persistent contrail behind it, showing the enemies where the aircraft carrier is. And he said, Reinette, I'm going to teach you how to read the sky for 2.5, nearly 3 weeks. He says, this is what you're going to see today. According to radiosonde data, and that's a weather balloon that's released all around the world at the same time, every 12 hours, this is how you're going to read, and I'll tell you exactly when you're going to see chemtrails in the sky and when you're not. And after 2.5, nearly 3 weeks of that, I was like, oh my God, he's right. Jim will get into what we have now. There's actually there's software out there. We can do it for you because not everyone has a Jeff Ray available. That was a big game changer. The other thing is this. The other big game changer is the high bypass turbofan engine. I was just assumed, no, it does not create persistent contrails. Well, it ends up that it does create more persistent contrails than the low bypass turbofan engine. So that was a big one too. And then we can kind of get into the jet fuel. But another big one for me, folks, was the understanding that all these heavy metals, and especially aluminum in the rainwater, we're getting aluminum in the rainwater and the soil. Well, I come to find out from ClimateViewer that if you are testing rainwater and you're testing all those different metals and heavy metals, aluminum, if you're testing aluminum, if you do not test for silicon, which is sand, You do not know if it's naturally derived or if it's actually unnatural aluminum. So all those rainwater samples we've been looking at from people for years, nobody's ever tested for silicon. Ends up all the rainwater samples we collected are null and void, never admissible in court because we never tested for silicon. Why? It's this microscopic dust that comes from the Sahara. It's the second most naturally found mineral on the planet. And so all these aluminum test results we're seeing in rainwater, they don't mean anything because silicon was never tested. And then,
interesting. So you didn't have a full enough picture to really understand what was natural or what is modified.
No, and that was a shocker to me. And then also, the other thing is just, well, and Jim will get, I don't want to start getting into what Jim can prove, but essentially, there's also a gag order, the famous gag order. So I had a legal team, high-end attorney, constitutional attorneys out of Houston, Texas, and we're pursuing a really easy win, we thought, the gag order. We're told there's a gag order on NOAA, meteorologists, and so on. We're like, well, that's a First Amendment violation. They have no right. We want to get an easy win under our belt, and then we'll go for the big fight, right, in court. So we go out there, we keep looking for the source document, the original document from the federal government, silencing the meteorologists and the weather reporters. And we come to find out that source document didn't exist. It actually has to do with the Public Employees Union. They're having internal negotiations with the union. And it was actually a non-disclosure agreement. Like, you can't talk about our internal discussions. That's it. And when I found that out and I went to the individual, there you go, that was telling this story, said, hey, we want to let you know this isn't true. And we found out, and I thought he didn't know. And so we said, you have to correct it. Here's the information. We spoke to the peer attorneys themselves, the actual legal counsel. And that individual continues to tell that story, that is the linchpin. Why we don't know about geoengineering programs is because there's a gag order. The gag order does not exist. Anybody want to disagree with me? Can send me the original source document. Ends up that Jim and Lee,
I'll drop it in the chat.
Lee found this out years earlier. We found out by paying our attorneys thousands of dollars to find out it didn't exist. It's not a real story. Jim already knew that. I could have saved us thousands of dollars. Didn't know.
Yep.
Wow, Jim. So how did you get into all this stuff?
I'm nosy. I'm curious. Like by nature. I actually came at chemtrails completely backwards. I became a anti-geoengineering activist, from the get-go. I don't want to get too much into my background, but I've been a hacker since I was 12. So I know the internet. You can, if a gnat farts on the deepest corner of the dark web, I can smell it. So I know how to navigate the internet. I know how to find whatever I want immediately. And I've never seen a pipe or a pump that I wasn't able to locate in under 5 minutes and explain exactly what it was, which is what I'm going to be doing very soon with chemtrailfacts.com. I'm actually going to make an entire page of every single pump and pipe you've ever seen in any chemtrail video. And I'm going to show you where it came from, what it does, and how you got lied to. But like with this gag order thing, obviously this is something Dane Wigington's 3 pillars of bullshit. His 3 pillars of bullshit are high bypass turbofans cannot create contrails. Retrofitted nozzles. We have a photo. They are spraying the chemtrails. But he never calls them chemtrails. He only calls them geoengineering, which is also incorrect. And then the third pillar being, and the reason why nobody will tell us about this is because gag order. He even said this just recently at a Shasta County hearing that was just this last year. And he's still regurgitating the same stuff that he did from like the last time he was in Shasta was like 2012. So it's kind of sad. I mean, people have reached out to him. They've told him all these things. Either he's completely just paranoid and doesn't trust anybody who's literally going, look, dude, you're wrong, and here's why, or he's just lying to you. So it's one of the two. I don't ever cast the scarlet letter of agent, or any of that stuff. I just assume narcissist or capitalist. Like anytime I hear talking heads on the internet, I always assume the best. But in my personal life, I hope for the best. I expect the worst. So I always expect the worst out of most of these people. And 99% of the time, if people ask me, Jim, have you ever watched so-and-so? I'm going to tell you no. Because I've never been the type of person to like listen to somebody else teach me a thing. When I have access to the entire internet and a logical brain, I'm going to, have a thought, and then I'm going to test the hell out of it. And then once I come to a conclusion, I'm going to go find somebody who has the exact opposite opinion of me, and we're going to go at it. And I love confrontational, debate. And my grandma always told me there's two sides to every story, and somewhere in the truth lies the middle. So you got the debunker saying these are just condensation trails. They're just harmless water vapor. And then you got the chemtrail side saying, no, contrails don't exist. Contrails, this is the most common stated thing I've ever heard. Contrails disappear, chemtrails stick around. Mm-hmm. That's also a misconception. So when I go and I put them together, it is condensation on a chemical trail. Mm-hmm. They're chemtrails. They're contrails. So like, why are we so focused on this slave speak? So what really the majority of the problems, and a lot of what David said, comes down to semantics or slave speak. If you don't understand the terminology, you're going to come to false conclusions. So a good example of that is chemtrails is like a catch-all phrase for anything sprayed in the air. So by that definition, we're talking zinc cadmium sulfide spraying in the Manhattan-Rochester Coalition, 1952 through 1970s. The U.S. Army Chemical Corps didn't admit to this till 2008. And they were spraying radioactive zinc cadmium sulfide. An example, Operation Large Area Covered. They used C-119 flying boxcars to dump radioactive particles from California to South Carolina. And that's just one of many examples of, all of the different tests that they did during that time. The government kept that a secret from the 1970 to 2008.
And a lot of the conception I hear is just that there's all of these like petrochemicals and they need to get rid of them. And so then they just spray them or it's some sort of
so like that's the coal. Yeah, why? That's the coal fly ash theory. This originated with a guy called the HARP Report. And he put out a video, I want to say circa 2016. I could bring the video up right now. I have a bookmark for everything. But it's literally Chemtrails Are Coal Ash is the name of the title. The HARP Report. Anybody can Google this. Go to YouTube right now and watch the video. It's still up. And he started to link Tinker Air Force Base and coal ash. And let me tell you, I'm going to ask each of you, does this pass the sniff test? Here's how the story starts. This is the first 3 minutes of any argument is always the most important. His story starts with, I know a guy who spoke to a whistleblower who told him chemtrails are coal ash. Now, if you're willing to believe that, then buckle up, Buttercup. The rest of this fucking story is going to be great. I'm not willing to believe anything past that point. Now, I'll take it. I'll put it in my little vault and I'll lock it away for another day. And if things, if the stars align and I find evidentiary, tidbits that align with this, or if I can actually find something at Tinker Air Force Base or any kind of document trail or anything. I mean, even like you can go into like the economic sectors of the world and find out what's happening with coal fly ash. Like where's it at? How much is being stored? What's it being used for? What are the feedstocks how do they reuse it and sell it? J. Marvin Herndon locked onto this like a snapping turtle. And then he started writing papers about coal fly ash. He published his peer-reviewed journal. It got kicked out of peer review because all the scientists laughed at him because his conclusions were completely flawed. So then he calls me and I tell him, if you had just said black carbon instead of coal fly ash, you would be correct. Because all of the chemicals that he's writing about in his papers are present in heavy fuel oil, aka bunker fuel, which comes from international shipping tankers. All of the chemicals that he is finding come from heavy fuel, heavy crude oil, which has now been 2020, the International Maritime Organization banned them because they create ship tracks, so that they're chemtrails of the sea. They create marine stratocumulus filled with sulfuric acid and all these heavy metals and black carbon. And if he had just said and I even gave him like 18 references.
Jim, what did you mean
by
that for a second? Are you saying that the ocean evaporation of that material is carrying that material in it? Is that what you're saying?
No. So this is coming directly from when you go to your local Walmart and you see made in China on every damn thing there. You can go to marinetraffic.com and you can look at these massive ships
that are burning
and they're burning the bottom of the bunker. So when you refine fuel, you have heavy, crude oil.
Yeah.
The very bottom of the barrel is called heavy fuel oil, or bunker fuel as it's known. Then as you start to refine up, you get to the, diesel fuel, then kerosene, then gasoline.
The barrel crap.
They are burning the worst shit there is. And therefore, like when crude oil comes out of the ground, it is loaded with metals and all of these toxic chemicals because it's unrefined. To get it into your gasoline powered car, every time they go up that level of the refinement process, they're getting impurities out. So where we're at, with like diesel fuel today, this will just give you an example. 18 wheelers, tractor trailers, big, rigs, they would run on diesel fuel that was about 500 parts per million sulfur. Recently, the EPA passed a regulation changing it to ultra low sulfur diesel fuel, 0.15 part per million sulfur. Why? Because sulfur kills people. They know this. So the same thing happened with the International Maritime Organization. They said, well, we're going to get rid of the sulfur in the ship tracks. We want them to switch to sustainable fuel. And they came up with something called VLSFO, very low sulfur fuel oil. Instead of heavy fuel oil, it's very low sulfur. So they got to move all the sulfur out of it. A, that's expensive. B, they don't want to do it. C, geoengineers love sulfur. That is what this is all about. 1991, the Mount Pinatubo eruption occurred. The planet cooled. The geoengineers got a boner. They all said, I want to make a volcano too. That would be a great idea to block out the sun. The idea originated at Lawrence Livermore National Lab with Edward Teller, Roderick Hyde, and Lowell Wood. If you don't know who those people are, Edward Teller invented the hydrogen bomb, and Lowell Wood is known by his best friends as Dr. Evil. You can't make this stuff up.
I want to interject in one moment when you're done. This is really important, you guys. We have to go back to coal fly ash. Coal fly ash was one of the narratives I was going to take to court. I believed it. And unlike COVID, where I did not give over my agency, I dug deep to get to the truth. I did give over my agency for many, many years with geoengineering. So I realized with coal fly ash, there's no one putting it in the jet fuel. I say to people, go get some ash out of your fireplace, put it in your gas tank of your car and see how far your car will run. So there's no coal fly ash going into the jet fuel. And they're certainly not going to have little nozzles spewing it out. Why? Talk to any pilot. They avoid volcanic ash plumes like the plague. Why? Because it will melt up the turbines and the engines in a matter of a few seconds and will drop planes out of the sky. So do you think for 1 second that we have airplanes out there, even the military, are spewing coal fly ash, which is equivalent to volcanic ash, when you have airplane or airline companies who've invested $100 to $300 million per plane? Takes them to get 30 years to get that investment, returned, and they're going to spew coal fly ash in the atmosphere and destroy their planes, possibly drop them out of the sky. It's a no nonsense, and that was one of the narratives I was going to take to court, and it fell apart like a hot potato.
So that kind of goes back to David's point about the jet fuel hoax. I mean, we can't let this go, so we got to dig into it for just a brief moment. Even if let's pretend in an alternate universe that jet fuel does not exist, that somehow perpetual motion devices, compressed air, whatever you want to believe, is actually operating these fans in the sky. if you go and you do any research whatsoever, you can go talk to somebody who actually works at an airport, who's actually had to replace fan blades. And they're going to tell you, and even the, the fuel injectors. Oh, we're pretending fuel doesn't exist. Well, forget that I said that part. Just go look at all of the photos of engine wear and damage. And from, just ingesting, things like she said, like volcanic ash or any kind of smoke plumes, Saharan dust. In fact, most people get real twisted about aluminum. The dust plumes that blow off of the Sahara Desert that land in Florida and in California put more aluminum in the air than anything else in the world.
So
that's why
they're not just getting rid of extra weird chemicals and just spraying them. That's basically the gist that we're trying to.
Let's be critical about this. They might be. There is zero evidence to prove that. That's the difference. That's where I land on everything. Is there provable evidence? When I say tangible, provable evidence, I mean, could I take this in a court of law and convince 12 normies that I'm telling the truth? No, there is zero there. So that's where I land on that. Geoengineering is real. Secret government spraying programs, they're real. Why? Because they've happened before. But does that mean they're happening now? Well, it seems like that would be likely, since Plan Colombia was spraying mycoherbicides similar to Agent Orange back in Vietnam. This was as recent as 1990. Plan Colombia was spraying mycoherbicides on Colombian cocaine crops. So these are just examples of, the military spraying things like herbicides, pesticides. I mentioned, Youngstown Air Reserve Base has an aerial spraying unit. They use C-130s to do adulticide, where they spray like mosquitoes. So a lot of times what you're seeing, or they spray herbicides also. So a lot of time what you're seeing is people sharing videos or pictures of this equipment and then attributing it to every single plane you see overhead. And I'm going, no, that is actually the MASS system, the modular aerial spray system from Youngstown Air Reserve Base at their aerial spraying unit. And it's used to spray oil spills, mosquitoes, and kill trees.
Right. Finish
go ahead.
Well, and I want to talk about the aluminum. When you were asking earlier about like what's changed when I started working and looking through the legal lens, like I've got to take this to court. It has to have standing, irrefutable proof. So one of the other jaw droppers for me was just only a couple months ago, and that is now also in the petition for rulemaking, is that we are all focusing on climate change, which I think most people here would understand is a big old boondoggle. There's no there. What we're no longer talking about is acid rain. So it ends up that jet exhaust has sulfur dioxide. What does that mean? Well, sulfur dioxide creates ultimately acid rain. What does that have to do with aluminum? Well, when acid rain hits the soil, there is a chemical reaction, and the naturally derived, naturally found aluminum in soil has a chemical reaction with this acid rain, and it actually makes that aluminum now bioavailable. What does that mean? That aluminum in the soil can now be absorbed through the trees, your produce, right? Crops, it goes into the waterways, and I'm sure it's going into the whole entire water cycle. So here we are thinking that all this aluminum we're seeing in the water, rainwater samples, in the soil samples is coming from above. Well, it kind of is, but it's coming above from as acid rain and creating a chemical reaction.
Yeah, it's more of a complex kind of natural side effect versus a malicious plan.
Well, again, but we can say this. It's considered unintentional geoengineering, right? That's not intentional. The jet exhaust, what it's doing is not intentional. However, could it ever be weaponized? Well,
the result is
it could be weaponized, and that's a whole other level. That's a whole other topic.
So since you just mentioned the unintentional part, so there's a lot of people all excited thinking, oh, the states are coming on board. They're finally waking up to geoengineering and chemtrails spraying in the sky. And I want you to unpack that for just a moment, Reinette, so that it just blows that out of the water for people.
Okay, so
like how would you guys define it now?
That
shift, you're redefining geoengineering.
Right.
So, this is where terminology really matters. Do you mind, Reinette?
Sure. Go for it.
So when Tennessee, this started with Rhode Island and Zero Geoengineering, Jolie Diane. I don't mind dropping names because hell, she was at my EPA hearing in 2015 when I went to I actually testified about jet air pollution in Washington, D.C. So I met Jolie Diane. 2 years later, she raids my website. She makes zerogeoengineering.com. She's the one who actually initiated all of these laws in most of these states, starting with Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and then a bunch of other states, leading to Tennessee. Tennessee actually passes the ban with Representative Monty Fritz. And lo and behold, the chemtrails don't go away. Why? Because they banned weather modification, they banned geoengineering, but planes making clouds is neither. And it's both at the same time. How about that? So what they refer to as unintentional geoengineering or unintentional weather modification, inadvertent weather modification. I went in 2018 to the American Meteorological Society's annual meeting in Austin, Texas, and they had what was called the 21st Conference on Planned and Inadvertent Weather Modification. These have been going on every 2 years for like 30 years. So when you understand that they look at both, as they put it, planned and inadvertent or intentional, unintentional, that's where you have to draw the line. Can you prove that it's intentional or not? So to put it real bluntly, the entire chemtrail conspiracy comes down to one word, a single word, intent. Yeah. Prove intent. How do you prove intent? I mean, we're going back to court here, right? So that's where I've kind of landed on this, is that when it comes to planes making clouds, you cannot prove that, like with Tennessee and Florida actually is criminalizing it and saying that they're going to do inspections at the airports. They're going to find absolutely nothing. I'll bet this left testicle on that. I have not lost it yet, but this is a recorded space. So a
surmise of this is the 21 or 25 states that have done the bans on intentional geoengineering, intentional, right? So there's the catch.
Right.
That's
so
the catch. That's intentional, so it's going nowhere.
And they don't have the right to regulate aircraft emissions under the Clean Air Act. No state shall write any regulations for emissions from aircraft that do not mirror that of the EPA's Clean Air Act. And the Federal Aviation Act says that no state shall impede interstate commerce as it pertains to aircraft. So saying you're going to send the National Guard up there to ground a flight would be, a constitutional crisis. I asked Monty Fritz, I was like, go flex your 10th Amendment and try it. I mean, make it go to the Supreme Court.
So this is what influenced us. Okay, so you have this anti-geoengineering legislation going on. They are all focused on quote unquote intentional geoengineering. That is cloud seeding, that is stratospheric aerosol injection, right? That could be solar dimming. This would influence your weather, right? So that's the intentional. What we found out though is that the last time that the EPA addressed commercial aviation was back in 1961 with the Clean Air Act. They said, commercial aviation, it creates cirrus clouds, it creates these condensation trails, but just the cost of doing business. Well, that's when they had maybe 300,000, maximum 1 million flights a year back in 61. Mm-hmm. Now we're at 45 million flights a year, probably climbing more like to 50 million flights a year. And so we realized that we need to actually go to address the EPA, and we can't take them to court first. We have to exhaust all avenues. So it's got to be a petition for rulemaking to say, hey, look it, you're derelict in duty. You have not addressed commercial aviation, which is considered unintentional. But if you know it's doing damage, and you turn a blind eye, and it can be weaponized, by the way. You can use AI software to make sure that it does create these persistent contrails at certain times in certain locations. There's nothing stopping that. But nonetheless, they have not addressed commercial aviation since 61. So in the petition for rulemaking, we're like, look it, you've got to address this. You've got to address the jet fuel. You've got to address the acid rain. You've got to address the unintentional solar dimming that commercial aviation is doing. It's already doing the job. You don't need the military to go out there and do solar dimming or Bill Gates. It's already being done by commercial aviation. And so This is everything we're putting into the petition rulemaking, saying you've got one chance. You got to change your rules. You got to test the fuel. You got to test the air. You got to test the soil and the water. You've got to do all these things. You have to set health standards for ingestible, inhalable, and do your job. And they're completely, neglect. So negligence. So this is what has crafted our petition for rulemaking. Is we know if you go to any of those states now today who have passed the anti-geoengineering legislation, ask anyone, they're still seeing streaks in the sky today. Why? Because they were not addressing the unintentional geoengineering, which is commercial aviation.
So the Trojan horse here is that it's all built in the fuel, and it's all being dispersed naturally through the engines in commercial airline. And now that they haven't done any updating on their regulations, now we've got millions more airplanes in the sky. That's the crux. That's the crux right there.
Yes, and as Jim will tell you, it's important that we deal with the clandestine, secretive programs. There's nothing stopping. Nothing's been codified, no legislation, nothing, right? You got to assume that stuff is still going on. That is the needle in the haystack. And interestingly enough, we're so busy looking for the needle, we're ignoring the haystack. It's the haystack that's blocking out the sun. And that is where we're like saying, hey, I'm sure the petroleum petroleum industry, I'm sure the commercial aviation industry love that we keep looking for the needle. And again, got to be addressed, but we keep just flat out ignoring the haystack when the haystack is growing and growing and growing and growing every year, every single year.
Brilliant.
Interesting.
Okay, so let me just jump in here on this interesting point, which is this is my observation that most of the fuel in an aircraft is used in two ways. One is on takeoff, the rocket fires off and you get up there. Once it's going, the fuel is used just to be a clarification about implosion motors. The fuel is used to break the motor from imploding. Just so we clarify that. It's not used as it's an implosion motor. It's suctioning through the atmosphere. You have to use fuel to keep it from running away and imploding on itself. That's an important point and distinction that I want to bring in. And by the way, I was with Jörg Schauberger, Victor Schauberger's son, and he told me that Airbus had come to see him and wanted a bunch of Victor Schauberger's models and had manufactured a bunch of jet engine parts that he would not allow me to photograph, but I saw it based on Victor Schauberger's models. So the idea that a big air company like Airbus is using Victor Schauberger stuff even today, which is implosion motor stuff, proves a very important point that jet engine is not what you think it is. I just want to emphasize that. And that's something I want you to start looking at more closely. And this is why the jet fuel hoax is so big, because there's no way they're burning all that fuel going over all that. Over
that's a logical fallacy, dude. So the high bypass turbofan, people say, well, all the thrust comes from the fan. But in reality, the compressor has to burn fuel inside the high compression part of the engine to turn the fan continually all the time. The jet exhaust plume is what you're seeing here. You guys can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
So most people don't see this version of the graphic. This version of the graphic adds in, there's actually fuel being burned right here, and that's what turns this big fan. Dane's version of it, I could go show it to you, but I'm not going to because screw that guy. This is a high bypass engine, right next to a low bypass engine. See the difference? There's no contrails coming out of the back of this one. There are definitely contrails coming out of the back of this one.
And the high bypass turbofan engine creates cooler condensation trails than the low bypass. That was changed in the 1990s. That's one reason why you're seeing more persistent contrails.
And that's why it says right here, at an altitude range, there is an altitude range that exists in which an A340 causes contrails while a Boeing 707 can cause none. This is because it is more fuel efficient. Like you said, once you get the thing going, you don't have to burn as much gas. Because you're not burning as much gas, you have a cooler exhaust plume. Because the exhaust plume is cooler, it can get colder faster and turn into ice. So at the end of the day,
that's an implosion phenomenon. That what's coming out is colder. That's my read on it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to look more. I'm being just completely transparent. First time I've ever heard of an implosion motor. But you can see, I actually Googled it. It's up here at the top. But yeah, I've got that in my bookmarks of things to do. But when we talk about this stuff, you can verifiably look at multiple different resources on this. And even if you don't take my word for it, hell, Dane Wigington in the Deming says he flew his own lab up there and found exactly what I'm about to show you from this peer-reviewed science. So I made an infographic to make it very easy for people to be able to see this. These are the metals in jet exhaust. Why is that important?
Rainwater samples. You find this in the rainwater samples.
Yeah. So,
but you can't prove it's coming from chemtrails. It could be coming from industry. It could be coming from ground transportation. That's where it gets tricky, is you can't prove the source. It's difficult.
So all of these are internally mixed with the soot particles. So when you're talking about chromium, iron, molybdenum, sodium, calcium, aluminum, vanadium, barium, cobalt, copper, nickel, lead, magnesium, manganese, silicon, titanium, zirconium, this is not just jet fuel. This is jet fuel plus all of those metal particles, all those fan blades, they're eroding, plus the oils and lubricants. They have barium in the lubricants that are inside the moving parts of that engine. So all of that's coming out the end. It's not just jet fuel.
Yeah.
And the part that this is the unintentional or whatever you want to call it. I say it's intentional at this point because they damn well know it, that at 18 kilometers in the stratosphere, they found 10,000 black carbon particles per cubic centimeter. And given the shape and location of these particles, it could only derive from emissions of aviation fuel. Why is that important? The reason it's important is because when you look at what geoengineering is supposed to be, stratospheric aerosol injection, if you're flying above the tropopause, this is the line between the troposphere and the stratosphere, the dividing line. It's not always 39,000 feet. It can range all the way up. I've seen it over, Key West, Florida at like 56,000 feet. So now we're talking right up at, the geoengineers level. But if let's say that the tropopause is at 39,000 feet, any plane flying above that will not create a white cloud. It will not create a line in the sky. It is impossible to create them in the stratosphere because it's a temperature inversion. So stratospheric aerosol injection, which has always been proposed at 60 to 90,000 feet. And for those who don't actually read all the literature, I've read over 1,000 peer-reviewed papers from these geoengineering freakazoids. They always say 60 to 90,000 feet. Mostly, there are only 5 chemicals they ever talk about in this order: sulfur, calcium now has moved to second place, aluminum, titanium, and diamond dust. That's it. So of those 5 chemicals, they want to loft them to 60 to 90,000 feet. Why is sulfur number 1? Why is it important to what I'm saying right now? Because if I just told you that black carbon exhaust from jets have been found at 60,000 feet, that black carbon is wrapped in sulfuric acid. Every time whenever you're burning plane, a jet is in the air and it's burning its fuel, it's putting out 100 quadrillion nanoparticles per second. Those black carbon particles are filled with all the metals I just mentioned. They have a graphene coating and they're wrapped in sulfuric acid. This does 2 things. Because they're black, they get heated by the sun. They raise up to 60,000 feet. And then the second thing is, as they finally rain down, as David said when he was spurging earlier, love you, brother. When you were spurging earlier, you said that he saw the chemtrails were above where they were flying. Well, that's true because inversion, because what's called photophoretic levitation. So because these black particles get heated, they rise up. And as they rise up, they carry the metals and the sulfur into the air, up higher into the stratosphere. Even though a plane's not flying at 60,000 feet, there is a 60,000 foot layer of buildup that is whitening the sky. Right. Geoengineering, solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection, these terms all mean the same thing. Let's put reflective particles to whiten the sky, not create clouds.
And what's up with that?
So that's why I created this section to really hammer that home for people. Geoengineering does not create visible clouds. Weather modification does not create visible clouds. Poisons do not create visible clouds. So in all of these cases where you're talking about solar radiation management, and people get these terms wrong all the time. So I'm not coming down on anybody, but in geoengineering, you're talking about either solar radiation management or carbon dioxide removal. Those are the two main categories. I'm not so much, we're not talking about sucking CO2 and pipes and all that stuff today. We're talking about the sky. So under solar radiation management, there are three major types: stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening. That's where they spray sea salt into clouds to mimic what ship tracks do with the bunker fuel to make the clouds brighter to reflect sunlight. And then cirrus cloud thinning. What the hell is cirrus cloud thinning? That is literally melting your chemtrails away. The reason why is because they create a blanket over the planet. And anybody who's ever been a Boy Scout, anybody who camps, hikes, fish, if you go out at night and you have noticed that it's warmer on nights where it's cloudy, period. Why? Because the long wave radiation gets trapped at the ground. It gets reflected back down by the clouds. So effectively, they're creating a blanket. They're creating their own fake global warming and blaming it on you and the cow farts and all of that. But in reality, the clouds that planes are making are trapping heat at the ground. So they came up with the idea of cirrus cloud thinning and contrail avoidance to get rid of more cooling contrails, less warming contrails, predictable for operational planning. Bill Gates, with his breakthrough energy, with Ken Caldera, top geoengineer in the world, just created contrails.org. That's contrail plural. And they're admitting all this stuff in public because, hell, I've been talking about it since I testified at the EPA in 2015. I guess now they're just going to admit it, screw it. But weather modification, that's all troposphere. So we got to go back to this real quick. This is ground-based cloud seeding with cloud seeding generators. You got cloud ionizers, you got lasers, and then the marine cloud brightening. That's from boats. That's geoengineering from the ground. Then you got cloud seeding flares, 1,000 to 20,000 feet. These are to, make rainfall, precipitation enhancement, snowpack augmentation, adding snow on top of mountains, all of that sort of stuff. All of this happens well below where planes are flying, but people still refer to it as geoengineering. They predominantly refer to it as geoengineering, or, anything else under the sun. And then, the secret programs. I literally, each one of these is a different link where you could read all about it. It's been on my websites for, 15 years. So these are all real calmatives. Most people never even heard of a calmative or biological. It's a type of biological warfare. Clandestine and secret programs. Yes, they exist. They occur in every single historical example of a clandestine operation. They never flew at 35,000 feet to disperse a chemical. Why? That would be the dumbest way to do it possible. Because dilution is the solution. The higher you fly, the more it's diluted, the less of a dose you're going to give to the person you plan on poisoning. That doesn't even make sense. That has not happened throughout the entire, whether it's Operation Sea Spray, large area coverage, big itch, big buzz. I could go on and on and on. All of these examples all occurred low-level flying, direct dispersal on their intended targets. So again, it doesn't make sense. What do make clouds? Sounding rockets. They make visible clouds. You've never seen one in your life, but that is actually a barium. That is trimethyl aluminum right down here, and this is strontium. I can show you a video if you want to watch it, but we're not going to. And what about the military? The military can create contrails. Like we don't want to call them contrails. Contrails has become a dirty word. But this is literally Arnold A. Barnes Jr. from the U.S. Air Force, Hanscom Air Force Base, Phillips Laboratory saying weather modification using carbon black. Carbon black is actually a chemical that was used first in 1958 by a lady named Dr. Florence Van Straten, who created clouds on demand. So commercial aviation uses black carbon. That's soot. Carbon black is the stuff that's in your laser jet toner. It's what the black material they put in tires to make them black. It's being used in pavement to make your driveway a magnet. Carbon black manufactured, black carbon, burnt refuse. So with carbon black, it says increase cirrus cloud cover. So whether you call it a chemtrail or a contrail, if it sticks around and it fans out, it's neither a chemtrail or a contrail now. It is a cirrus cloud. And that's the part that's lost on everybody. So what does the military say? This was in 1997, increase cirrus cloud cover to deny visual satellite or high altitude reconnaissance. If you got that cool UFO and you got it at Area 51 and you don't want the freaking Chinese to know about it, not only does carbon black make clouds that can block out visual satellites, it also makes infrared satellites defeated. You can't even view heat signatures through carbon black modified clouds. Decreased light level for nighttime operations. This is to block out the moon.
Dig into that, Jim, because one of the things I've noticed is that there seems to be, like, over a theater of war, for example, there's going to be more chemtrailing going on.
Yeah.
That it's to block satellite photography. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. So the first thing in my interactive timeline on weather modification history, I got a redacted version of a file from the Black Vault, and it's called Spacecast 2020. And in that document, there's an entire page blocked out, all except for one sentence. And in the middle of the page, it said, the Russians, displayed the ability to create infrared defeating clouds. And once you understand that, then you understand, so this is about counter espionage. This is about, being able to stop your enemy from seeing what you're doing on the battlefield. Similarly, during like Operation Desert Storm, the Iraqi Republican Guard were like the most they're so scary with their tanks and stuff. Oh, but guess what? You can't see in the dark and we have night vision. You're about to get fucked up. So they go in, they wait till the darkest night possible. Then they go create a bunch of clouds to block out any starlight, anything, and make it dark, so dark you can hold your hand out and not see your own hand in front of your face. And then they kick their ass all in one night. Next day, you see them on the news, all coming up with their hands up, blown up tanks everywhere, and everybody's going, America, fuck yeah. And I mean, that's literally what happened. And then you go, well, how the hell did they do that? Or is it psychological operations? Was it Jewish space lasers? Like, let me in on the secret. Bro, it was really simple. Like, they literally just made clouds and blocked out the sky, and they couldn't see a damn thing. And we have night vision. So this is like a smoking gun sheet of paper. So much so that the top debunker in the world, a name probably unknown to most people today, Mick West from Contrail Science and Metabunk, he spent like almost 2 decades debunking chemtrails. And then I finally got him to debate me after like 10 years of us going back and forth. And I made it all about semantics. Anyway, I'm not going to get too much into that. But after the debate, I showed him this document along with 2 Freedom of Information Act requests that I have that also mention carbon black dust use by the U.S. Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the U.S. Navy at China Lake, California, the Naval Weapons Center, the same place that did Operation Popeye, weather warfare in Vietnam. And when I showed him this paper, he said, and how do I know that this is real? And I said, because here's the link from Wayback Machine from army.mil/abarnes/TTS 1997/abarnes.zip. And I sent him the link and he said, I can't debunk that. And that's the problem. The debunkers, Oh, by the way, he quit debunking chemtrails and now he debunks UAPs. I still can't get used to saying that. They're UFOs. Let's be real. So cloud modification for surveillance and coverage is a thing. Creating, suppressing Cirrus contrails is a thing. The military does not want their B-2 stealth bomber to have big white lines behind it like B-17G flying fortresses did during World War II. So planes have made contrail since planes have been flying. It's just got exacerbated recently, and I'm gonna skip past most of this and just go to this chart because I think it's the most important thing to show as a trend.
Can you share screen again?
Yeah, I'm going to share the screen now. I thought I was actually sharing the screen.
I want to say, Jim, I'm just so completely impressed that you remembered the exact link to the Wayback Machine. Like you just pulled that right up, and it's like
I have a photographic memory. It's both a curse and a blessing. I remember everything I ever saw on rotten.com from when I was 17 years old.
No.
Oh
Gosh.
There's no take.
We've got about 15, 16 minutes left. If you've got some questions, just put them in all caps and throw them in the chat, and we'll try to get to those questions. We may not. Just want to let you know.
So this is what I want to like nail home for everybody as just my 70,000 foot perspective on this. Yeah. You mentioned David mentioned NATO. I got NATO in there, bruh.
Yep.
So in 1970, we had about 250 to 300 250 to 300 million passengers per year. Okay. The first civil high bypass engine was either the GE CF6 1971 or the Pratt and Whitney in 1970. I'm going with the Pratt and Whitney. I'm going to change this graphic after this video, but anyway, all of this is subject to change, but the big things are in there. So by 1990, we're at 1 billion passengers per year. So I was in high school, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95. So I graduated in 95, right about here. Okay. So we're still at like 1.3 billion passengers per year. By that time, 90% of the flights in the entire world are using high bypass turbofans. The reduced vertical separation minimum was implemented in 1988, worldwide adoption in 2011. So this means that planes can now, instead of having to keep 2,000 feet between them, they can keep 1,000 feet between them. NATO single fuel concept conversion from JP4 to JP8 was completed 1988 to 1996. What happened in 1996? Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025 was published. This officially started the chemtrail conspiracy.
Who published it?
The first person who, the U.S. Air Force published this. I have an entire backup volume of it on weathermodificationhistory.com. All the documents are there. So you can still see that. It was actually called Air Force 2025. So there's actually like close to 30 or 40 different documents.
You're saying that when this publication came out from the military, then the general public starts kind of creating this chemtrail story.
Because in it,
turning it into the bad guy.
They found it in the book, right?
Yeah, because in the Owning the Weather in 2025, they mentioned what I just showed you in that other slide. We can create, suppress contrail cirrus on demand for blocking out satellites. So Richard Fink in 1997 on the Usenet news groups, shout out to people who are alive and actually know what the hell those are. He blamed the JP8 jet fuel for the increased contrail coverage. Now,
got it. So the whole narrative is getting kind of twisted and confused.
Right.
And therefore we're making like a boogeyman where there isn't a boogeyman.
I like to follow how public perception is
what about
shaped.
The tic-tac-toe boards though? You know, the tic-tac-toe, like the crossing over pathways above.
Well, it's not on the website yet, but since you asked, I'm gonna like actually bring it up. Let's see right here. Flight data 30 years. This is why the tic-tac-toes right here. Okay. In 1980, this is what they look like. That was the flight pass. This is 1985. This is 1990. This is 2000, 2004, 2008. Is that a freaking spider web or am I crazy?
Right.
Just to give you an example that's even more accurate, this is 2004, just in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Or excuse me, this is 1993. These are the flight paths in the United States just in 1993.
It's a lot more since then.
This is 2004.
Yep, there we go.
So when you you
that's
see
a crisscross? That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah. How many crisscrosses do you need? Crisscross applesauce, triangles, and all them cobwebs.
Right.
So all of and the sky is also a river. So it's moving from west to east. So every time a flight flies along one of these lines, that line then moves a little bit to the east. And now another flight comes along that skyway. It's a highway in the sky. These are all highways. These are interstates in the sky, and people are flying along them regularly, and the sky is moving. So this is naturally going to create grids.
And sometimes you see those streaks. Sometimes you see that jet exhaust. Sometimes you don't. All depend upon the atmospheric conditions, period.
And I want to show you guys that, and then I'm going to land my plane. But the point I want to make about public perception is that nobody takes into account into all of this is that, William Thomas appears on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. He popularizes chemtrails from 1999 through 2002. I have all the recordings of every conversation he had with Art Bell. They're going on this website. You'll be able to listen to them yourself. So then we have the social media revolution.
Right.
MySpace, Facebook, YouTube, all within 3 years.
Sure.
By 2006, half of the world have mobile phones built into them. Then the iPhone's invented in 2007. By 2010, we have this major uptick in social awareness, people looking up, and then what in the world are they spraying debuted in 2010. And it's just off to the races. And we have this exponential logarithmic code going on right here. So now we go from flights. Yeah. The flight numbers are even higher than some of these numbers you're seeing here. But this is only accounting for passenger flights. This isn't all the military flights. This isn't all the freighter and cargo flights, like for Amazon packages and UPS. So when you look at this numbers, we're at 4.46 billion right here in 2019. COVID hits, it drops down off the chart right here because the data that for this, I threw this all together today before coming on the show. Like literally, I made half of this website today.
It's awesome.
The 2024 data is almost 8.5 billion passengers in 2024.
And you guys, this is what's important. Only 20% of the world population has ever flown. Most of those flights are in the US and Europe. So you have 80% of the population that's never flown. You now have nations who are building airports, starting airlines. So the number of flights are going to explode exponentially. So you think the sky is bad now and it's whitened and the streaks, you're going to see a massive whitening over the next 5 to 10 years because now the rest of the world is going to start flying.
And these are all the planes. And right now it's 10:20 p.m. on the East Coast. And these are all the flights in the air right now as we're speaking.
Jeez Louise. So you guys, just to kind of to synopsis, because I know we want to, you're saying okay, so Reinette was in the story of geoengineering or whatever the story was, save our skies. They're kind of killing us, all this stuff. And that basically you realized actually the bad guy is not who I thought it was. And instead it's really just the fact that the EPA hasn't changed their regulations and more of this stuff is going on. But I'm hearing there is an acknowledgement that there is clandestine kind of stuff going on. Yeah. But it's not something we can really address head on is kind of what I'm hearing you say. And then here's the other thing is that there's so many people who at least they have a narrative that they're getting sick from the sky.
Right.
And can you just kind of say something about that? Because I'm this is my takeaway is
fear is the mind killer.
Is not really the bad guy.
Yeah, fear is the mind killer. So at the end, Go ahead.
When I found out that most people think of geoengineering, they think of the streaks in the sky, period, right? And we think those are the clandestine programs. Come to find out, it's actually mostly commercial aviation. When I discovered it was commercial aviation, I have to tell you, now that I see the streaks in the sky, it doesn't do the number on me like it used to.
Mm-hmm.
It does not. I don't go into angst. I don't get angry. I'm like, oh my God, they're spraying us today. Changes everything. And let me tell you, the one thing that will heal you the most is to be in a state of joy. The one thing that will make you ill is to keep you in fear, period. And so for me, when I really realized that, oh my gosh, it's commercial aviation, this is, again, we've got to stop looking for that needle in the haystack. And we have to let people know, we're trying to say, hey, look, you're right. There's something happening in the skies, but it's not what you think whatsoever. And while there's a massive awakening that we should be celebrating, we come to realize, well, this is a bummer because we're awakening, but we've got the wrong narrative. We're never going to hit the nail on the head because we don't understand the narrative. We don't understand what's really going on.
So I'm gonna bring this forward and then just kind of work on a wrap here. So I have the same thinking, Christian. We're getting into the realm now of what is the way forward? How do we navigate this? Clearly, our awareness is number one.
Yes.
How do we get that awareness? Well, that's kind of what we're doing here. And then having self governance of our own emotions through that awareness. All those are absolute imperative. Other than that, what's the way forward?
Okay, I'm going to have Jim answer this, but I want to say this, you guys. This is where things get a little complicated. We have been now looking at a boogeyman out there saying bad men, bad guys are doing terrible things to us. And what we've come to realize is actually it's our lifestyle. It's how much we fly, we go traveling. It's how much we order stuff on Amazon. It's how much stuff we order from China. So it's our lifestyles that's creating more and more of those crisscrosses. So it's a little bit more complicated than saying, oh, you bad man, stop. So it's really, our fingerprints are ironically all over this. So there's a lifestyle change, but Jim can kind of get into the type of flights, which flights are the worst for our skies and our health. So Jim, do you want to talk about that?
So I look at this, much more simply than I used to. Like every year that I read, I learn more. I try to engage with intellectuals, like Ulrich Schumann, smartest guy on the planet on this sort of thing. I try to engage with people like that. Sometimes they don't respond. It's okay. But I want to understand this very, so that I can explain it simply to people, because this is one of the most complicated topics there is. Yeah. And that makes it very hard to explain it all in a very short, succinct way. But if I were to simplify it down to just the bare minimum, what does the Bible say? If I could summarize the Bible in 2 words, what would it be? Fear not. So I've spent my entire life, the only thing that I fear is the unknown. So therefore, I try to understand everything. And once I understand a thing, I do not fear it. Fear can do more to your body than any chemical on the planet. This has been proven time and time again through MK Ultra, through Pavlov's dogs, through, all of the different experiments. Fear is the mind killer. So when you have an entire chemtrail industrial complex feeding you fear and clickbait titles, they are reaping the money from your addiction to fear. So I would start with, if somebody is scaring the shit out of you and they're not offering you a solution, they are not an activist. They are not a truther. They're an info fucking tainer, and you need to understand that. I'm not doing this for popularity. It'd be much more popular for me to just scare the hell out of you, because most people love that shit and they will pay for that shit. This is a proven way to get rich quick and get yourself on Alex Jones and Redacted and The People's Voice, Sean, and all the others. Yeah. I don't want that. All I want to do is live my life free from fear. And my goal is to free as many people as I can. If I free one, I have done my job for the day. So I want to empower people to be able to go, all right, this is not what I've been told. I need to understand it more, and I can do something about this if I call it by its name, pollution. Mm-hmm. If I deal with pollution, then I'm dealing with the 45 million flights per year. Once I deal with that pollution, The only thing left, if we actually got our feces consolidated and started dealing with the pollution, then guess what would be left? The only thing left would be intentional spraying. If there was intentional spraying, that would be all that's left. Then it's going to be really damn easy to deal with those people. Wouldn't you agree? So that's been my operating, parameters this entire time. Let's focus on the haystack and then remove that, and all we'll have is a stack of needles left.
Great. And then so thank you for that. That's phenomenal. That makes perfect sense. And Reinette, so just kind of some final words to help us wrap this thing up. So you're coming at it from a little bit of a different angle. Obviously, the awareness is huge. Managing and navigating our fears, monumental, especially when it comes to affecting the quantum measure.
Right.
So in regards to some of the work that you're doing, it's more the granular process. You want to get in and start working on the regulatory elements.
100%.
As we're becoming aware of our lifestyles and the fear mechanism.
Right. We've got a massive education, how we fly. The short haul flights are by far the worst. As you were saying, Avocado, the takeoffs and the landings are by far the worst. We should really try to keep our flights to the long haul flights where you can't fly or take a train.
80% of flights are short haul flights.
So that is where
keep that in mind.
Educate people right there. Now, also, I do want to say we can use AI software to have the planes fly in such a way that they're not in the atmosphere where they leave the persistent contrails. Now, they can weaponize that as much as they can use that for a benefit. So that is also going to be in the petition for rulemaking. Like, you've got to actually admit that they are creating clouds, persistent contrails, and you've got to reduce that. Then we got to, of course, reach the public, say, look, you guys, you got to change your flying habits. And when we look at, let's say, the heavy metals and the soot, it's bad with aviation, but let me tell you, far worse with ground transportation and with shipping. So what can we do there? Trump is on it. Bring manufacturing back to America. So we're not dependent upon shipping all of our raw goods or raw materials to China, making cheap products and shipping them back. Reduce the shipping tax because they're terrible. So a lot of it actually is in our own hands.
Yeah, decentralize everything. This globalization movement is what has created these conditions.
Yes.
The reliance on everybody from everywhere except my local damn community. We forgot what we learned during World War II, which was V for Victory Gardens.
Yeah.
We grew local, we bought local because we had to. If we weren't buying all this shit from China, we wouldn't have all these international shipping tankers polluting all of the USA. If we didn't, buy everything from Amazon, then there wouldn't be all these planes flying these boxes around. Like every time you're participating, every time you buy something and ship it. So we have to think about it like that. Can I get this locally? Yeah, it might cost me a little bit more, but I would rather buy locally and keep vote with your dollars, like Nathan just said.
And let me tell you, that sulfuric acid from the aviation, from the ground transportation, from the shipping, that is creating this acid rain that is actually, again, making that aluminum bioavailable. And all those trees are sucking up that aluminum and it's killing off the trees. That's why the trees are dying. That's why the fires are so explosive and hot and fast. This all comes back to, you guys, our shopping habits,
right?
Our traveling habits, our flying habits.
And
everyone's saying, look at the needle in the haystack, look at the boogeyman, the straw man. It's like, no, man, it's us, guys. It's us. That's a paradigm shifter. And it took me months. It took me months to digest that and go, oh my God, I'm actually responsible. All of our handprints are on this.
So it does actually fall back into our hands after all, doesn't it? So, Gabe, do you have anything you want to add into this before we do a quick wrap?
I'd love Jim Lee to start digging in on the jet fuel and the actual construction of the jet engine. This is really interesting. I think I narrowed it down to 6 companies in the world that manufacture the jet engines that are used on all those planes, on all those flights all around the world. Like, for example, Rolls-Royce is one of them. And it's just, to me, they're holding a secret. Why would they lie about how much fuel is on that aircraft? That means they're hiding something. Why would they be hiding something? And what's being hidden? So we need your mind on that, Jim Lee. You got an incredible mind, and I know you can, get to a fart across the dark web of the internet from a gnat. So we need your help, bro.
Well, a lot of it's social engineering. Like most people imagine hackers are like, the shit you watch in movies. 90% of hacking is actually social engineering. The hacker Bible is actually called the social engineering, the art of human hacking. So what I've done is not only just go to my local airport and actually witness it my damn self. I've seen the engines torn apart. I've talked to many different people from many different fields, from aeronautical engineering to actual mechanics on military planes, on civil planes. But the kicker is this: my stepfather just retired from 30 years as a chief master sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, and his specialty was fuel systems engine corrosion. When I learned about the NATO single fuel concept and that all NATO countries switched from JP4, which was a 50-50 blend of kerosene and gasoline, to JP8, which was all kerosene with a bunch of additives, I called him up and I said, "Hey, Sam, could you tell me what happened when you guys switched from JP4 to JP8? First, he belly laughed for a good 30 seconds and then started telling me horror story after horror story about what's called coking and all the engine problems they had from this shitty fuel that NATO ran down their throat, which was loaded with way more metals. So it's not a coincidence that all of a sudden in 1996, we not only had the Owning the Weather in 2025, you had Richard Fink and William Thomas bitching about the increased cloudiness when all 28 NATO countries simultaneously switched their jet fuel. I don't think that's a coincidence. And if you want to know who made the decision, I got to the bottom end of the rabbit hole on that. It's called the NATO Pipeline Committee, and there's actually this special assignments group within the NATO Pipeline Committee, which consists of 12 individuals. And even I can't get even one name of those individuals. Yep. So if I were Dr. Evil and I wanted to geoengineer the entire damn planet, and I sat on that 12 special member group, then I can write the STANAGs, what are called the NATO F codes. I can write the ASTM specifications for every single flight on the planet just by rejiggering how much sulfur is in there. Oh, when I mentioned that tractor trailers are 0.15 parts per million, less than 1 part per million. Do you know what the EPA regulation is for jet fuel?
What?
3,000 parts per million.
Yeah.
I was a kid hearing about acid rain every damn day.
Right.
And everybody tells you that the fires are burning so crazy because they're spraying aluminum on us.
Right.
But what they never told you was acid rain increases soil pH, which makes aluminum more bioavailable. That's why the trees are filled with frickin' aluminum and everything. And that's why Monsanto has an aluminum resistant seed.
And that's what we have in our petition. We have tons of sources. Jim has them. I have them. We have all the evidence of look at guys, it's acid rain. And no one's talking about that any longer. It's all climate change, climate change, climate change.
So savetheskies.com. Is that
savetheskies.org?
Save our skies.
Savetheskies.org.
Saveourskies.org. Saveourskies.org.
And then Jim, your new site that you're actually just releasing on the show, chemtrailfacts.com. Is that correct?
Yeah. And you can find all of my stuff at connect.climateviewer.com. That's like my personal link tree. I haven't even linked, because the Chemtrail Facts is so new. I haven't even put it on my own dang link tree. I didn't have time. It was a little late for the mic check.
Thanks for busting that out for us.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
And
I appreciate it.
I'm on Substack. Jim's on Substack. I have bi-monthly Save Our Skies Storm webinars. We get into all the nitty gritty. We teach you how to read Whitney.com, how to read the skies, meteorology, everything we've discussed here. We 2 hours at least twice a month, and we just do this all the time. Tons of people come on. Jim comes on, and we hammer it out.
You know what I love? You're inviting everyone to check their narrative. And it's not saying that, there's not weird stuff going on. It's you're not kind of putting a Pollyanna mask on, but there's still an invitation to check our narrative. And I think that's really healthy.
Don't give over your agency. I did with geoengineering. I didn't with COVID. I didn't give over my agency. But with geoengineering, I assumed somebody else had the answers for many, many years. And as I said, when I looked through the legal lens, all of a sudden it fell apart, and I had to really have a come to Jesus conversation with myself. What's really going on here? And I've landed in a very different place.
Well, bless you for having an authentic heart and wanting to really, truly find your way to the truth of this.
Thanks.
Jim, I really, really appreciate what you have been working on and what you're bringing forward. I really look forward to having some one-on-one chats with you, diving a little bit deeper. Brother Avocado, I love you. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
I hope
beautiful
everyone
evening.
learned something.
And I want to say this to David also, because the day we all agree is the day we could all be wrong.
Yeah.
I may be wrong,
Love that.
and I do not, and I give the same warning to everybody. Don't trust me, because you know what? Next year you're going to talk to me, and I'm going to say, you know what?
Right.
Last year Jim was full of shit, and that's based on this evidence. And we should all be like water. Don't be crystalline. Yes. I'm open to the possibility that I'm wrong. I always will be. And and I'm looking forward to looking into some of the stuff that David was talking about.
I love it. Beautiful.
But always be skeptical and curious.
Mm-hmm.
So one last thing, guys, for some of you newbies, if you're not familiar with Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship, go to sacredhonoref.com and watch the seminal edumentary called Breaking the Spell. It's coincides with all the stuff that we've been talking about today, but it's just really gets into
it is private membership. So you become a private member, and then you opt in. They'll say, you have to double confirmation, and then you're going to get a login space to our private member environment, and then it's very easy to find. So just go through the gates, go through the gates, and break the spell.
Absolutely. I love you.
Thanks, everyone.
All of you.
Great to see you, Reinette, David, Jim. Wonderful.
Lovely seeing everybody. Thanks, everybody. What a great night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
You guys.
Thank you all.